Hello, I'm in Berlin, outside Galerie FeinArt Berlin, where I'm having an exhibition. It's called Saturnalia, and I'm just going to take you on a quick tour. The gallery is in Charlottenburg. It's a very nice part of the town, and we had an opening last night, which was great. Lots of people were here, made lots of friends, but it's quieter now, and I can just take you quickly around and show you the space. As you can see, just give you a quick tour. It's a lovely space, to show work. It was for a while an art studio. You can see here they left one of the walls in art studio style, just as a reminder of what it was like. This is my painting. It's called Old Adam, and it's a picture of a very old guy, basically. In the Bible, Adam's supposed to have lived to over 900 years old. That's the story, and I like the idea of painting a really old guy, and that's what I did in this case. And the model was a guy called Frank Stevens, and he modelled for me for about 30 years, and he actually died before this was finished. But he modelled for me in his last year, and he was an amazing looking guy. And he's in the picture, he's holding in his hand some dirt, and the dirt is falling through his hand, and he's pointing down to it, and it's basically about our fate, because that's the way we all go. So it's a picture. If you know Piero della Francesca's fresco cycle in Arezzo, which is about the death of Adam and the subsequent history. When he died, the story goes a seed was planted with him, and from that grew a tree, and from the wood of that tree the cross was made on which Christ was crucified. So the story goes, and it's sort of a beautiful story about recycling, I suppose, composting of humans, and turning ourselves into something after we die. And I sort of liked that, and I thought of painting, the death of Adam for a long time, but he's still alive here, and he's talking about, he's communicating to us about, our fate. So that's the idea here. At the other sort of extreme end of my work, here's a little picture of some buns. This is a painting called 7 Iced Buns, and some of my American friends will say, they're cupcakes, but it's just terminology, they're the same thing. They're little cakes with icing on them, and I really enjoyed painting the little decorations on the top and all those sort of intense spots of colour. If you're Irish, and particularly from the Wexford, Wicklow area, you might identify those as coming from Stafford's Bakery. They're you get them in packets, sort of set up like that, and you'll see them in a lot of the shops. So the space here, it's a beautiful space. This is sort of the main gallery area, and here is my painting. This is called Burning. I've done a series of these figures, of figures basically representing partly sort of the element of fire in terms of the 4 classical elements, but also this sort of notion of sort of incandescence, of being consumed by a flaming passion, you might say, and sort of running with it, and setting light to whatever you find along the way. So it's sort of a nice dynamic image. These figures started off as male, but I thought it would be interesting to paint a female version. So here is a painting of a bunch of grapes. This was the last picture that I painted. It just got finished a week or two before my shipment to Berlin, and I really enjoyed painting this. It's a very typical subject for me. It's symbolic. Titian said a painting should be like a bunch of grapes, and I've often thought about that as the notion. You know, the bunch of grapes for Titian and for other artists represented the idea of a sort of a spontaneous order. You know, a spontaneous natural order. Grapes, you know, they hang together. They're not sort of controlled by grid, order, geometry, and it's more of a spontaneous and natural order. So I think that's what Titian meant by it. But I quite like painting bunches of grapes because there's great sort of surface and texture and light sort of being transmitted within them. Let me see. I can't turn the camera around here, but I hope you can enjoy the texture and the impasto. And over here, I have another little bunch of grapes. These are green grapes, and this is a smaller painting, and a sort of a different aesthetic. A white on white background, and they're trying to get a notion of sort of saturated luminosity. I particularly like these because I grew these grapes myself. Unfortunately, I had to move, so don't have the grapevine growing where I am anymore. But these were, you know, I grew this vine hoping to paint the grapes. This and one other bunch of grapes were all I managed to get out of it. But that's what happens sometimes. So this painting is a fruit picker. It's sort of an allegorical figure based on the story of the tree of knowledge, and the tree of knowledge is often shown as a fig tree, particularly in Mediterranean countries. And I like the idea of this figure, you know, picking the fruit from the fig tree and really enjoying it, you know. So I'm one of these people who tends to think that the story of the tree of knowledge and picking the tree of knowledge in the Bible is pretty pessimistic, you know. It's like it was only doom that came out of it. But, you know, knowledge is ecstasy to me, you know. Knowledge is what we you know, what I yearn for and enjoy. I always enjoyed learning things. So this is a figure who is, you know, in ecstasy, and it represents, I suppose, a particular type of ecstasy. There's a sexual component to this picture, but that's partly because we're embodied creatures. So, you know, sex, the body, knowledge, these are all sort of things that we have problems with. But we need to try to keep them together and enjoy being human, you know? Enjoy sex, enjoy beauty, enjoy using our senses to explore the world. So that's partly what this is about. And I wanted the figure to be very sort of, you know, I wanted the composition, which is very sort of formal in its way, to keep a certain distance between us and her. But, you know, to sort of elevate her and make her iconic. So this is a picture of, this is one of my paintings of a loaf of bread. I call these my bread and butter paintings, you know, this type of work. They're simple pictures that are relatively straightforward to paint. It's still very challenging to do it well, but I think of them as sort of little offerings, little gifts, that they're not quite as complex as some of my other pictures, but they still offer something, you know, and they help support me. I call them my bread and butter pictures because they are my bread and butter. I earn, a good deal of my livelihood, painting simple pictures like that, which are, in their way, gifts and celebrating of the simple pleasures of things like a loaf of bread, which most of us enjoy greatly. This is a painting of a bottle of oil, of linseed oil. And again, it's just one of these little observations and, these little sort of gifts of truth. And in this, I love the way that the oil and the glass sort of refracted and concentrated light on the reverse of the label. And the only way that I could capture that was with an intense, like the purest cadmium yellow that I could find. And to try to balance that intense colour against these very sort of soft, muted greys, and still keep it very naturalistic. So that's what I tried to do in this little picture. As we head around, this is my painting, Saturnalia, which is sort of the title piece in the show, and it's a painting which, in some sense, it's a conventional still life. And you've got a wine bottle and fruit and very conventional things in the foreground. But the further you go back into the distance in the picture, the sort of crazier it gets, and the picture sort of opens up into a vast world, essentially of imagination. And that's what I tried to do. I try to combine realism and imagination and, sensibility and thought and ideas. The Saturnalia was a festival in ancient Rome and was a celebration of the god Saturn, who is old Father Time, basically, a bit like Santa Claus. It was a celebration of gift giving and merrymaking around the winter solstice, and also a celebration of inversion. I think that it was a bit like the clock being reset at the winter solstice, and as often happens when things are reset, they also go a bit haywire. And there was license in the Saturnalia. Servants got to boss their masters, and everything was upended, and I sort of liked that, and that's what's to some extent represented in the background. While it's sort of conventional in the foreground, you've got this this frog beside the wine glass, and then as it goes back into the distance, you've got a spacecraft and dinosaurs, and then Saturn in the distance. So it's a bit like anything at all could enter into my pictures, and they could be about anything at all. So it's sort of a little manifesto piece of, here, what can I do? What elements can I bring together? There's also an element of sort of, in terms of shrinking space and time into a picture. Saturn is old Father Time, and the idea of sort of covering vast elements of space and time in painting is one that I particularly like. So dinosaurs represent ancient history, spacecraft represent, well, maybe the future, although that spacecraft is rather antique. But it's just, what can I get away with? What can I put together in a painting? Over here, we have a painting called Present. And that's what it is, it's quite literally a present. I like the idea of my paintings being presents. I like the idea of, people giving them as gifts, but it's also, each one is a gift from me, and it is about, in something like this, presence with a CE at the end. The idea of, here it is, that's sometimes what I like to do. Say, here is something, enjoy it. It may be something that you didn't look at very closely before, and obviously you don't know what's in here, but you can just enjoy the wrapping, the lovely, the silver and gold tones, and the way the light reflects off the gold wrapping up into the bow on the top. So, that's part of the idea of just making paintings that are gift-like in some way. This is my self-portrait called Pushover, and I like the idea. I had this idea of painting a portrait on the diagonal, basically, but I felt I had to justify it in some way, and I thought, well, maybe, if the figure is being pushed, that might justify the angle. The diagonal is the line of greatest sort of dynamism and movement in a painting, and I like the idea of the sort of holding these elements in balance, but there's also, I suppose, a narrative here. This is me, and I suppose anyone who's lived for a while has experienced something a little bit like this, of getting a shove, of someone not doing something very nice to you, and the sort of sense of confusion, at the times, like, what's happening here? Why is this person doing this to me, and not understanding? So that's a bit what it's about, I think we've all had that feeling at some point in our lives. So I try to represent myself sometimes, as a representative human. It's not necessarily about me. It's about what anyone might experience and embodying that experience. So this is my painting Rest, which is loosely based on the myth of Sisyphus. And the story of Sisyphus comes from Greek mythology, and this guy is condemned to roll a rock uphill forever, up a mountain in the underworld. And when the rock gets to the top, it rolls back down. He has to do it all over again. And obviously, it's hard and rather pointless work. And again, I suppose most of us will have experienced that sense of, having to work hard at doing things that ultimately seem pretty pointless. And but this character, he's having a break. He's sort of jammed his feet in against the ground. The rock isn't going anywhere. He's got his back to the rock, and he's looking out, and he's enjoying the view. He's enjoying the sun going down, and I think that's what we've got to do sometimes, even when life is tough and work is hard and it doesn't seem like it's very rewarding. Sometimes you just have to enjoy the beauty along the way and be reconciled to where you are in the universe. So that's the idea of that. This is my big painting, which is called Allegory of Wisdom, and this one took me about 10 years to paint, and it's based on a smaller painting, which was the sketch for it, which again probably took about 5 years to paint. So this one was on the go for a long time, and it's essentially, again, a bit like the fruit picker. It's based on the story of the Tree of Knowledge and the sort of the tale of the Garden of Eden, but changed on my own terms. And the female figure is taking fruit from the Tree of Knowledge, which is shown as a fig tree, but she's being handed the fruit by a monkey, a baboon, sort of as a gift. And there's a type of wisdom, I think, that is a bit like a gift, that you have to be receptive to it. You have to be open and receive, and be open to a type of wisdom that comes, from being open and listening to yourself and to others. But the figure on the other side of the painting, the male figure, he is bringing a dead deer that he has obviously gone out and hunted. And he represents a sort of a different type of wisdom. He's by of fox in the painting. And this is sort of the wisdom that you have to go out and work hard to discover and bring home. And there's some wisdom that comes only with hard work or with trouble or with pain, and it's sort of bitter. And that's what he's bringing to the boy in the middle. The boy in the middle is he's sitting here reading a book. He's got the globe beside him, and he's reading a book. And in the book, there's a picture of a human embryo at about 4 weeks of development, and the human embryo at that stage has a tail, which is its evolutionary legacy. You know, we come from creatures with tails. The tail is also the symbol of the devil. You know, the devil has a tail, forked tail. So he is again enjoying learning, and the sunburst behind him sort of represents, to some extent, the ecstasy. You know, you can't really see the face of the boy, but the scene represents his ecstasy and his love of discovery, and that is a little bit of what the painting is supposed to be about. So he's at the center, but the other figures sort of fill in the imaginative scene. And one detail right down beside him, there's a skull on a newspaper, which is obviously the symbol of death, passing of time. And if you know your art history, and Courbet's painting of the big painting in the Musée d'Orsay, Courbet's Atelier, in the background, one of the details is a skull sitting on a newspaper. And I love that painting, and I love that detail. So that's how I got that. I just stole that idea and put it in. So here we have one of my little bread and butter paintings of a pound of butter, and or a half pound of butter. And it's just, again, it's one of these little plays on gift giving, and on the sort of the tonality of silver and gold, the gold wrapper, the gold and sort of silvery white wrapper around the pound of butter, and you know, just the play of light and the sense of fatness. You know, oil paint is great for painting shiny things, but also painting like fatty, greasy things, because oil is oily, greasy. So here we have the back room in the gallery, and again, it's a lovely space for hanging work. Back here is my painting Rex, which started out as a painting of the idea for it came from a dinosaur book that my kids had, which showed a human skull, and beside it a dinosaur skull for scale, you know. So it showed a big sort of, you know, big monster with teeth and the little human skull, and I thought that'd be a great idea for a painting. So I couldn't get a full-size dinosaur skull for my painting, but I got one from the Natural History Museum in London that was a quarter life-size, and I made a little ball of masking tape to represent the human skull, and put a little party hat on that, and I painted that scene, but blew it up to life-size, and then I have a human skull, so I painted that. And it's one of my bigger sort of still life paintings, and I quite like it. You know, it's sort of a vanitas painting. It's based on the symbolism. You know, the skull symbolizes death, but the dinosaur skull symbolizes extinction. You know, it's a death multiplied, and I liked that idea. Of course, the human species is going to be extinct someday too, so it's just a reminder of fate. You know, watermelons in touch for us, in store for us. So there's some other little paintings here. Here's a little painting of a bunch of flowers, which I tried to do with the most sort of intense blue background I could, to sort of have this sort of floating feel of, sort of spatial feel. Blue has a great sort of symbolic power to represent a sort of an immaterial realm, and I liked the idea of having this sort of immateriality, the material object, but in a sort of almost an immaterial atmosphere. So that's what I tried to do in this picture. This is called a scream. It's sort of a piss take on Edvard Munch's Scream. It's sort of existential dread seen from a dinosaur's perspective. It's sort of, you can see here the dinosaur, and he's not very happy. Obviously, everything's going bad, going wrong. He's surrounded by predators, and then there are these meteorites coming down. It's like the end of the world. So it's like, things are bad. So there's a bit of mockery, Obviously, things can be pretty bad, but we have to keep in mind, the scale of the universe and how long we're around for. So that's partly the idea of this. I like the idea of, a sort of vast space and time sort of squashed into a picture with, some, nice fruit in the background, in the foreground, and then a couple of rats for company, just to be annoying. Sometimes I like to annoy people in my pictures. And it's difficult to sell pictures with rats. People don't like rats for some reason, but I still like, the occasional, play with some of these themes. So, this picture is called The Joker Wins Again, and it's sort of an allegory of the art market and art world, decadence and all of that. In the foreground is a nice bunch of fruit again, sort of playing with this, fairly standard, conservative, normal foreground, and then things go a bit crazy in the background as you sort of go back into it. I used my kids' toys, sort of Disney princesses and superhero figures and helicopters and inflatable globes and things like that to construct this narrative, which is based around this scene here. The painting that the Disney princesses are looking at is Picasso's Demoiselles d'Avignon, which was for a while the most expensive picture ever sold at auction. It went for hundreds of millions, and it's sort of the idea of a piece of canvas on a bit of wood, bit of paint, selling for ridiculous figures. The GDP of small African nations. It's sort of obscene, and it to me it represents the corruption of the art world and monetary values and all the rest. So in this case, the Joker is sort of showing the Disney princesses who sort of represent the super rich, the 0.01%, and they're enjoying the artwork whose value is being inflated by helicopter money that's sort of coming down. In the background, sort of the world is sort of going badly. The world is deflating here, and the authorities are trying to get it going. Combat deflation with QE or helicopter money, and it's just driving up asset prices and making the world even more corrupt. And over on this side, the superheroes, they're looking on and they're angry and they're frustrated, but they can't really do anything about it, which is probably how a lot of us feel about stuff that's going on in the world, where we see really shitty things going on and we're totally we've no way to do anything about it at all. So we all must feel a bit of that frustration and impotence. And that is, I suppose, partly what the picture is about. Over on this wall, I have again some of my little small, simple bread and butter paintings. This is a little painting of a wine glass, just, obviously wine, there's a sacramental notion of wine as a sort of a drink that changes the mental state and can bring, it can be really nice, that feeling. So it's sort of about there's an ecstasy within the concept of that, and I sort of like that as a sort of an interesting sort of side matter. The wine, this is pure black, as a pigment, but just a little hint of red in the rim gives a sense that it has color. But I'm trying to, sometimes I try to stretch the contrast, that the highlight in this painting will be pure white, and the darkest areas in the picture will be the purest, deepest black that I can make, and yet they're balanced and natural, they hold together. Here's a bag of biscuits. Little painting again, it's a little simple icon, a little gift. I like the idea of someone maybe buying a painting like this as a gift, and bringing it to someone saying, "Here, brought you a bag of biscuits," and that's what it is. So, we all, I think, understand these sort of pleasures, and it's nice sort of to make an icon out of them sometimes. And this is the last picture that I'll show you in this picture. Oh no, actually there's one left. This is a painting, another little bunch of grapes. Again, with the contrast taken as far as I can, in terms of really brilliant saturated background, saturated with light, and then this dark object within it that, sits in the atmosphere, and captures the reflections of the light around it. So, again, this was done just a couple of weeks ago, just a few weeks ago before I came here. So, one of my more recent works. And the final picture I'll show you, this is the Madonna of the Future. And this is, again, a fairly recent work. I had a show in Dublin which was called the Madonna of the Future. This was the signature piece. And this painting, it's a Madonna and child, but with a little bit of a twist in that the Madonna, the child is an embryo, basically, or a fetus in an artificial womb. And the Madonna is, you might say, gender neutral or androgynous, and is based on Leonardo Salvator Mundi. And one of the interesting things about that ideal of androgyny comes from Leonardo. A lot of his figures are androgynous. They have they sort of combine sexes to some extent as an ideal of beauty. But the theme of this picture, I suppose, is changes in human nature. Changes in technology and how they affect what it means to be human. Pretty soon, you won't need to be a woman to have a baby. There are artificial wombs being developed. There are all sorts of things that will basically mechanize and outsource, potentially, human reproduction. And then the question is, well, what does it mean to be a woman? And what does it mean to be a man? And will those roles still have a strong meaning when, sexual reproduction isn't necessarily a part of them? So that's the idea of this picture. It's sort of, the figure of the figure holding up hand in blessing like that. It's based on the Salvator Mundi by Leonardo, I've reversed it, so this is sort of a left-hand blessing. But it's also based on a painting by Hans Memling of Madonna and Child. So it is rooted in Renaissance tradition and a love of Leonardo's paintings, but also dealing with very contemporary issues and trying to use the traditional skills, traditional styles, and traditional ways of painting and an older mythology to comment on the present and our current situation and the challenges, essentially, of being human, what it means to be human in the 21st century. So this is the show. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening and watching. And I hope you enjoyed this. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And if you want to see this show, it's on in Berlin until the 24th of October. And I'll see you around. Bye.